turn it off or silence it, I will call to order the work session for the Oregon City Commission for Tuesday, December 10th, 2019. Call the roll, please.
Commissioner Rachel Lyle Smith. Here. Commissioner Frank O'Donnell.
Here.
Commissioner Rocky Smith.
Here.
Commissioner Denise McGriff.
Present.
Mayor Dan Holliday.
Here. So we have future agenda items. Anybody have anything for future agenda items? Seeing none, we'll move on. 19696, renewable right-of-way permits for active use of sidewalks for commercial use from Mr. Lewis.
I am substituting for Mr. Lewis tonight. And Katie's putting a presentation up on the screen for us. Okay, so we received a letter from the Chamber of Commerce back in October talking about the concerns about the renewable right-of-way permit for obstructions in the right-of-way, specifically in regard to seating in the right-of-way. And so this is a very brief presentation of what we currently do and what our plan is for 2020, and then any questions you have, we're available for that. So our current code in Chapter 12 prohibits sidewalk cafes or displays unless an area is designated by the City Commission. For permitting, historically, A-frame signs have been permitted by community development. Starting in 2019, earlier this year, seating was permitted through a notice in the honor system. So we notified everyone that we saw doing placing seating in the right-of-way on 7th Street and Main Street, and we notified them saying you need a permit for that to do an obstruction in the right-of-way, a temporary obstruction, not a permanent obstruction. And we did not follow up on that. We did that based on the honor system to see how the program would go, kind of in a pilot fashion. We did not seek obstructions such as flower or plant features. We sent out 21 letters based on that visual inspection. 5 properties were actually permitted. The cost to do that was $162 annually. The reason it's annual is because we never know with business turnover what they're going to do, if they're going to change the amount of seats, if they're going to have a new owner that may do the same thing but doesn't understand the regulation, how to keep the sidewalk open to the public. The reason we chose $162 was that's the minimum fee that we have for any right-of-way permit in the city, and that's where we came up with that number. That dollar amount was in the fee schedule that was adopted by a commission in February. And why we started the program was the previous city engineer had come to staff and said, hey, we need to add some new fees in. Specifically, it was for small cells. And so is there anything that we've been missing lately? And one of the staff said, you know, I've had this request before of getting what do we do with seats in the right-of-way, and we permitted one back in 2018, and so what do we do about this? And so that's why we added that in at that time. There is a history to the program that back in 2009, there was discussion about implementing a program, and then in 2016, there was a further discussion where there was actually a panel that sat together and tried to come up with some standards, but nothing was ever proceeded forward after that. That was information that current staff did not have when we chose to make that decision back in early 2019. So this is what we're talking about. These are examples. These pictures come from Google Maps from summer of 2018. I think they're from 18 anyway. This is down on Main Street, and so you can see how it can get kind of cluttered. Looks like there's a basic path to get through on the sidewalk. This is the Caulfield House next to the Verdict. There's also seating on the other side of the building here. That tends to move around over time. That is Cafe or Mesa Fresca, and so they use a lot of seating. Most of these places use the seating during the summer. I did a drive-by a week ago, and only 3 or 4 people use it during the winter. Most of them put this up during the winter. This is down on the south side of Main Street. They have seating on each side to try and let people go through there. And then an example for 7th Street. We have 2 examples, this and then the bar just up the street with the neon sign. The name's escaping me at the moment, but they also have seating like that. And also what is the name of that restaurant? Midway, is it Midway Tavern? Is that the name of it? They also sometimes put seating out. So what was our plan for 2020? So we had limited success with the 2019 program, and so for fairness and equity, we wanted to send letters back out to businesses early to mid 2020 on Main Street from 99E to 14th, and on 7th from Center to Harrison. And every single business, whether they're showing any seating or not, we wanted to make everyone aware of what the policy is. We have a flyer that goes along with that. We then would come by with a drive-by audit to see, okay, these businesses have asked for a permit, but these have not, and then go back and make a second request. And then if that second request is not adhered to, then we would seek code enforcement to ask them to come into compliance so that we can make sure that there is a pedestrian-friendly area for everyone, as well as the inviting area for the cafes and seating that are there, which we also believe is a benefit. This is some pieces of what the flyer looks like, and we have it at our front counter over there. And that's the brief presentation I have, so I'm open for any questions.
Commissioner McGriff?
Yes, Josh, is it possible, which are the 5 that actually have permits?
The 5 are Weinhard Grill, Caulfield/Verdict, Mesa Fresca, Singer Hill Cafe, and what was Kehoe and Company.
Okay. Well, I will say that generally, and I'm going to pick on my friend at the Singer Hill Cafe, I have not found as a pedestrian that they pretty much, theirs is the neatest one that I have seen. I'm in downtown a lot, and during the summer, some of the ones on the south side of 7th, people in wheelchairs could not get by. And I'm just wondering if we want to look at, I'm not sure I support having it on both sides of the sidewalk, because it really creates an obstruction. And I'm not, people don't have to walk 3 abreast, but if you wanted to walk next to somebody on some of those areas, you can't do it. I mean, there's just no way to get through. And somehow or another, it's not being monitored to keep the chairs and tables, kind of people move them around, but then the business owners there don't really come back out and fix it. And then it's kind of just a mess. And I mean, I don't want to penalize anybody unfairly, but I think some of them have spilled out beyond what I think a reasonable person would assume their path of travel along the sidewalk. And so that's why I'm picking on Singer Hill Cafe, because it's very neat, it's orderly, you can get through there, there's not a problem. I'm not really picking on you, I'm complimenting you.
Thank you.
Well, it seems to me that we already have somebody downtown during working hours. Why couldn't our parking enforcement guy be the guy that goes through and checks? You can take a yardstick with you and just see, if you can't get through, then he talks to the business owner and says, hey, you need to have more space.
Well, Dan, actually what happened on the day that this wheelchair incident, I was standing there talking with Jesse, and Jesse observed that, and he went into that particular establishment and said, you need to move these. I mean, I saw him go in.
Who is Jesse?
The code enforcement
Code
officer.
enforcement,
Yeah, I don't know.
parking control officer.
Thank you.
Code enforcement, yes. So he went in and actually that day talked to them, and I think it lasted maybe a day, and then it went right back kind of which you saw in the pictures.
Commissioner Smith?
Can you tell me, I don't see the policy that we're talking about. So is the policy, are we only talking about restaurants or places of businesses with seating? Is that the only thing we're talking about?
At this time, so there is no official written policy. It's an unwritten policy with a fee that's in our fee schedule to use for right-of-way renewable permits that are for things in the right-of-way that are an annual type thing. The intent right now is to only take care of seating, because we find that the things like flower pots or plants are up against the building, so they're not causing obstruction. So seating has been what we've been focused on, but that doesn't mean that we can make the program more robust or look at more things.
So how does a permit fix the problem if we don't have a policy that states no seating on the other side of the sidewalk, or there has to be a 5-foot wide width to allow for wheelchairs? Like, I'm grappling with this, that the permit solves the problem when we don't have any guidance on what we find is acceptable or not acceptable.
Sure. The hope was that we do have policies that say that you have to have a clearance level. It's 4 feet for handicap. That's in the ADA standards. So that's the minimum. And then we do have the obstruction, that you can't have an obstruction in the right of way. We have that in code. And so that's what we're using as our means to do this. We could definitely wrap it up into a full-fledged policy. But at this time, that's what we're using as our basis.
I guess I hate for policies to be something that could be considered subjective to someone's personal opinion of when they walk up to a particular business and it says, oh, I think that's not permissible, therefore I need to call code enforcement versus someone else. So I'll move on from that. I think that's just one of my concerns. The other one is I'm trying to figure out, have you looked at other parts of the city? We're clearly focused on downtown and 7th. Is this a sidewalk policy that applies to everywhere in our city? And, there's businesses everywhere and sidewalks in a lot of places. So I'm just wondering.
Yeah, so the policy would be everywhere. However, down Main Street and 7th are the only areas where this exists, because most of the right-of-ways elsewhere are bigger. And so the sidewalks are not the type that you see in Main Street, where it's like a 10-foot sidewalk that goes straight to the curb. You're usually in the other areas of the city, you have the planting area and then a sidewalk, and so you don't have those types of issues. The cafe style things are usually on private property, not on public property. That's the downside of 7th and Main, is that all the sidewalks, the area for cafe seating is only in the public area.
Okay.
Well, it seems to me that if we're gonna have a policy, it ought to be written down. And more to the point, that if we're gonna have an enforcement policy, then there should be steps in there that say, okay, first you get a warning, then you get a second warning, then the third time we say, okay, you can't have your stuff out here for 3 months, or something like that, to encourage people to, follow the rules. And since we do have a parking guy who is out there every day, it seems like that would not be a huge imposition on his time to police that.
Yeah, I guess I just feel like, and granted, I'm new, so maybe you talked about this at the end of 2018, but this feels to me like something like Public Works said, here's an issue, we're going to apply something in 2019, and it hasn't been fully vetted or fully discussed as far as what the policy should be. And, you picked the minimum fee. We received a letter from the Chamber of Commerce about that amount of the fee. It just feels very much like we've pulled it, I won't say completely out of thin air, but maybe not completely vetted. And so I'm challenged with where we're at tonight, to give full support of just moving right into 2020 without thinking that some adjustments need to happen.
And I guess my question for the city manager and the commission would be that I would agree it would be great to get this written down into a policy and vet some of those things. I think we have the question of, should we make this as simple as possible and only focus on seating and not look at sidewalk sales and all this other thing, which is an animal of itself. And then most policies, these type of policies usually are working policies that are things that just are written for in-house, and they're not adopted policies by the city commission. Is this the type of policy you would want adopted by the city commission, or just become aware of once we create it?
Dan? I guess if we're going to have a policy with regard to, appropriate seating, then I think we do need to include the other things. I know that one of the only 2 businesses that do a lot of sidewalk display, Maisie Mays, had them, but that was within their property line because it was underneath their awning and they were keeping their stuff dry. The other antique place, small, that's down on next to White Rabbit, Black Ink, they have items on the sidewalk. But I mean, I think to be fair, we need to look at everybody. I also like of us to consider doing, reducing the fee slightly. But I think the right-of-way does belong to the public. My biggest fear is that there are some very zealous ADA advocates in this state. They will not hesitate to sue on the drop of a hat. And if we don't have some compliance, we're going to get, I mean, it's just a never win. It's not, that it's never going to happen. And like I said, I was worried about that incident that I saw this summer with the person in the wheelchair. And it was not one of the small wheelchairs, it was one of the big gigantic ones. And they did not make it, we had to move stuff out of the way for them to get through. So I think if nothing else, we would want to protect ourselves and the particular businesses, because that's just a lawsuit waiting to happen. And the ADA laws are just getting, they're getting more and more restrictive, as they maybe they should be. So we really need to do something to make sure that we are in compliance, that with those regulations, that we're making sure that there's plenty of room on the sidewalk for people to pass through. And I don't know 4 feet is really enough, considering now they have the mega wheelchairs. So we might need to revisit that, but I think I would ask my fellow commissioners to consider reducing the fee. And I know there's at least one business owner here that may have something to say about that, or may have a comment, if that would be allowed.
Commissioner Smith?
So, I agree that it should be everything. I don't think it's fair to single out table seating versus displays or whatever out in the right of way. So I think we have to do everything with all of that. I think the 2 separate pieces that I want to look at is whether or not the things on the street are making profit. And what I mean by that is if you have tables in the right of way or you have product in the right of way, you're making money on that, which, I think makes sense to require a fee or a permit. If we want to have business owners keep flower pots or plantings out there, and we also then charge them a fee for that, I think you're going to see them disappear. I think people aren't going to spend the money to put plantings or things out in the front of their shop to make it look better and then pay a fee on top of that. Yeah. So I wouldn't mind seeing a permit for that, but I think it needs to be, more of a sign off that it's not in this area, it's not in this area, and there's space around it. I think we risk seeing all those trees and plants disappear if we don't separate those. Mm-hmm. And maybe that's true for something like a bench too, where it's just, no one's, they're just create a space for someone to sit down. Because to me, they're kind of providing the same service as Public Works is by putting planters throughout the city or benches or garbage cans or something like that, versus something that they're selling.
The benches, I think the flower pots, he said, are exempted.
Commissioner O'Donnell?
Well, they're exempted now. That's not the way they're exempted in our code.
Correct. I'll keep it brief, because I think my fellow commissioners have said it all. I mean, the distinction is, does it generate income for the business or not, or is it beautification or generation of income? I agree that not only seating, but display of wares, and there's a certain charm to that, I admit it. I mean, it's kind of gives it a Saturday market kind of, hey, look, it's like a teaser to get you into the store. And I understand how that works, but the first criteria is passable thoroughfare, that and a definition thereof. I mean, if we don't have that, as Commissioner Lyle Smith said, where are we? So it's pretty straightforward to me. As far as the fee, you're talking about use of city property to generate income, and there's going to be a fee because that's pretty cheap square footage to expand your business. So the only question is, what will that fee be? Thanks.
And I'm fine with the fee the way it is. I mean, $162 a year for a business to have free, virtually free, it's another 200, 300 square feet to put your, whether it's talking about merchandise or whether you're talking about people sitting down and eating, I don't think that's excessive at all.
Or do I?
I guess what Mr. Wheeler's looking for, Mr. Lewis is looking for is, how we want to proceed. And I think that you need to come back to us in a work session with a proposed policy that covers everything you've heard tonight, and then we can have a discussion then, and then we can put it on the agenda for an actual code amendment.
Yeah.
Did you want to hear from,
But
did you want to hear from?
I would like to.
hear from who?
Ms. Yates, owner of the
Public.
Singer Hill.
Well, generally, we don't take testimony at work sessions. I think we've gone through the list fairly well.
I have one more.
Go ahead.
So, sorry, light bulb that came on. One option for the fee approach, because I'm thinking of like storefronts downtown where some of them, their storefront is only, I'm making these numbers
Small.
up, 50
Small.
feet versus like Mesa Fresca who has 150 feet of seating all the way around
Right.
their building. And I don't know if we even want to go there, but I guess one option to consider would be how much storefront, how much of that sidewalk are you beautifying or using versus, if you have a corner lot. I don't know, maybe that's getting too in
Not
the
everybody has a
weeds,
corner
but
lot.
not everybody has a corner lot, but that would be one way to look at a fee structure if we wanted to consider anything.
Yeah, I think that
Smaller.
could wait until
But that could,
wait until it comes back to us with something that's written down that we can actually
Yeah.
look at and observe and talk.
I could see, as Mesa Fresca say, they're using a lot of the sidewalk.
Well, and the curb
right
extension.
away, and for.
What is that pass-through or alleyway next to Weinhardt's considered to be?
It's a.
Right away.
It's an alley.
Yep, that's right.
It's an alley.
And it's full of
Dan,
tables and
maybe you
chairs.
weren't aware, but there was, on my first or second meeting, we did make it was a 4-0 vote that we would allow people to talk to us about an issue at work sessions.
I'm
that-
fully aware of that.
and
I'm
it's on
also
the
fully
record.
aware that I run the meeting.
I understand.
And
I'm just
I don't
asking if we could
I don't think
possibly
there's
hear from
any-
Mrs. Yates.
I don't think there's any necessity here from Mrs. Yates yet because we don't really have anything to work with. So once there's something to work with, I'd be more than happy to have you come back and give testimony.
Okay, well, I just
Thank you.
appreciate your consideration and, for that.
Appreciate that.
Okay, so you guys have direction?
Yes, thank you very
All right,
much.
thank you. We'll
Can
move
I add
on.
one more thing?
Go
Could
ahead.
you also look at the both sides of the street thing and also the use of the curb extensions? Because again, those are there to help pedestrians get across the street. Plus, that's where the curb ramps are, where someone would turn in a wheelchair to try to get to that curb ramp. And if you've got lots of tables crowded there, it makes it very difficult to access that. So using Commissioner Lyle Smith's comment about passable space.
No problem.
Okay, moving on. 19693, Oregon City Tourism Development Program update, Mr. Conkle.
Thank you. So tonight we're going to give an update on the next steps for implementing the adopted Oregon City Tourism Strategic Plan. I'd like to introduce Matthew Weintraub to come on up and give the presentation.
When's the new guy coming?
I can get an update afterwards. I'm still working on it.
Oh, okay.
He's not the new guy.
No, he's not the new guy.
Not anymore.
One of the new guys. One of the new guys.
I don't know who he is, so.
Introduce yourself.
Matthew Weintraub, I'm the
Scoot a little closer, sorry. Yeah.
the tourism program specialist here at Oregon City. Thank you for the opportunity to come for you and give you a little update. Like I said, one of the new guys I started just after Labor Day weekend here. So a little background on the Tourism Strategic Plan. It was adopted in 2018 by the City Commission and had three high-ranking objectives all around enhancing economic return from tourism and tourism-related activities here in the city. It included some very robust stakeholder engagement from various businesses and aligned and concerned citizens, and identified some key insights about the Oregon City visitor, about tourism here, and next steps. So some of those key insights led to 4 key imperatives, which I'll talk about a little bit later, as well as sub-objectives and some initiatives to build out a work plan that were developed. And now I've been tasked with identifying tactics, programs, specific initiatives to help fulfill those objectives. As you can see, this is the planning matrix that came out of the tourism strategic plan. Those initiatives and imperatives on the left, as well as some kind of plotting of scheduling of that work. We all know that we're in Q4 of 2019, but looking through this plan, operationally, we're more like leaving Q4 of 2018. I think that presents us a great opportunity to not have to spend 2020 going through another planning process, but using the great work that was already produced here and working through this plan as if it kind of extends to 2021. Just kind of putting that in reference. And some of that work that's been identified is including an inventory of assets here in Oregon City, of tourism assets. One was started through the strategic plan, but creating a more robust cataloging of those assets is necessary so we can fully utilize that information. Providing technical support and assistance to our history and heritage-based organizations here in Oregon City, and developing travel itineraries that our partners such as Travel Portland, who you can see in this image, can use to talk to visitors from outside of the region. Some other areas are understanding through research who our visitor is. The one kind of area where we need a little more information is who's traveling to Oregon City currently, why, and what they're doing, what they want. So using a program, for example, that Travel Salem first put together, as you can see, just deploying that survey. Travel Oregon, who is our statewide destination marketing organization, has a lot of data on the traveler. As you can see, we don't know that at the city level, so we need to find that information out. So some other work we'll be doing is rehashing and rebooting the field guide campaign that you may have remembered this from this past year, and also supporting our Midtown Business District and understanding how boaters, anglers, and sport fishers use the two rivers that border our city as well. So you may have seen some of the work we have been doing around town already. Want to thank you again for your support of the kiosk staffing at the elevator. We're really excited to partner with DOCA to do that for the next year. It's going to provide another touch point and another visitor center experience for travelers here in Oregon City. So thank you again for that support. We're excited to partner with DOCA there. You may have noticed on the roof of the toy store downtown is our Oregon City logo, our Travel Oregon City logo in lights. It's a nice little recharging solar array, and we own that. We'll be able to deploy that or redeploy that in other areas. Next week we're working to develop a proclamation of our 175th anniversary in the town, which will come for you next week. And we've also been doing some communication with stakeholders, supporting new assets as they come online, and working behind the scenes to revamp some of our social and digital presence to better speak to visitors or potential visitors before they come here. And finally, a little bit about our tourism stakeholder table. As you can see here on the left, a great many people were actively involved in that strategy plan, but continuing that work is going to need the continued involvement of some really effective communicators, some key members of our community, and in your packets, we've proposed to continue that through a tourism stakeholder table to help guide and provide input to staff as we continue to work through this area as well. So thank you very much. Yeah, I'll open up if you have any questions.
Questions?
Well, I guess I have a couple of questions. So I know that you recently attended the Clackamas County Heritage Council's meeting, and that, as you're aware, is a coalition of 20-plus museums, sites, and other folks around the county. So some of them in Oregon City, not all of them in Oregon City, but it seems that we should somehow try to loop that group in, if nothing else, their staff person, to help with this, since that person probably has the biggest knowledge and overview about all the organizations, including the ones outside of the county, outside of Oregon City.
Okay.
So that would be one suggestion. And then I think when we've talked a little bit in the past, that I was very pleased to see that we were not going to try to reinvent the wheel, and we do have a task list, and I think we need to just pick up where we were and move that forward. And I saw your proposed list and had a number of the same people, which means then we don't have to reinvent the wheel. Some people will have to get caught up, but that's pretty easy if they can read the plan. So I appreciate that from that standpoint.
Thank you.
Commissioner O'Donnell?
So I'll just say that we've studied this ad nauseum. We've got two previous plans. They're both good. One is even better than the other. I don't want to spend I look at the timeline, we're so far behind the curve on timeline that let's generate something here. Make something happen. Don't get all caught up in studying it, and we know what needs to be done. Let's make some progress, and I'll just leave my comments at that. I mean, to generate studies upon studies and studies, and all they do is sit on the shelves just is maddening to me. That's it.
Commissioner Smith?
I will add to that. So, one of the things that wasn't included in our packet is the 2015 tourism plan, which actually was better than the 2017 one. So, I think that hopefully all of us are aware of both of those. The 2017 one was supposed to be wrapped up 2020, which we're way behind on. So I feel like we have lost a lot of time. The other thing is that I'm not sure that this, let's see, the tourism update, what is it titled? The draft plan, Tourism Development Stakeholder Table Draft Plan, which calls for upwards of 7 meetings.
Oh, yeah.
And all of those meetings look like stuff we've already done.
Yes.
Almost all of them. And so to me, that's a 7 months more waste. So we have the key imperatives. None of those meetings get us towards that. We have several things that we're apparently working on as staff. Cataloging assets, travel itineraries. What have we done with that, and who's creating that?
I am. They're both in progress right now.
How are you creating that?
So travel itineraries, for example, there's an example of one that's posted on Travel Portland's website. That's a visitor-facing website, so talking to people that come from outside the region. That's just developing and writing content. So I would do that during the normal workday. Work with other stakeholders to ensure that embedded links, for example, are correct. Hours of operations are correct. And then when it comes to inventorying assets, it's literally just making a spreadsheet of them, ensuring that places are still open, being able to catalog them in the right column, in the right field, things like that, so that then we can populate whether it's a travel itinerary or whether it's an expanded website. So then when people can go, they go to traveloregoncity.com, they can say things to do, places to get a drink, for example, and there's drop-down information that has that accurate information, links to websites, etc. Which is a standard practice in the tourism industry.
Right. Have we reached out to the other organizations of this community that have already done all of that work? CHC has done it. The Heritage Area Coalition has done it extensively, way broader than the city. Historic Oregon City, and the Oregon Trail Interpretive Center, which I'm on the board of, has spent the last 3 years developing travel itineraries, partnering with all of these local groups and museums. I mean, this has already been done. And the fact that you don't know that worries me a little bit. It's so much work has been done already. And the other thing is all the people on this stakeholders group that we're going to actually make a table, which we're going to create this new table, all of them have been part of the process for pretty much from the beginning, writing both plans and being part of both plans, I should say, not writing it. So for me, in order for you to even be part of this stakeholder table, before you even come to the meeting, you should have read both plans. You should have done research on other plans from other areas. That takes care of the first 2 meetings. Generating ideas, tactics, and programs, that's the 4th meeting. That to me sounds like going back to the grants. I mean, this sounds like people sitting around coming up with ideas at the spur of the moment in one meeting of what we're going to do to fix tourism, and then on the next meeting discuss them and then present them to the commission. That sounds like the grant process that we had, where all these groups would work together and come to us, and that never got us anywhere. We already know what we're supposed to do because the both two plans has told us. We have heritage as our anchor. We need to expand upon that. We need to focus on consolidating hours, consolidating things, and working on making a solid plan with what we have that's good, and then add these other pieces. But none of these 7 meetings talk about that. I want to know how we're directing this next group. I don't know how we're going to get buy-in from anyone if we kind of present that this is the plan. Because we've all been through it, and some of us have been through it 4 or 5 times.
Are you done?
I'm done. Okay. For now.
Mr. Lyle Smith?
I'm not even sure where to start after that. Mine isn't nearly that impressive. I had similar questions about the meeting that talked about proposals that were going to be reviewed and then come before the city commission, I believe. And so I was interested in what funding stream that those proposals, those projects were going, where are these projects? How are they being funded? It just wasn't clear, like in meeting 5, it's proposals, and I assume that's being based on stuff in meeting 4, but meeting 4 doesn't say anything about proposals. I mean, it talks about initiatives and tactics and progress. So I just had a hard time making the connection between 4 and 5, and then I didn't know where the funding was going to come for, or if there was a grant program that we were talking about that wasn't listening.
I would say that funding either comes directly from the programmatic budget here at the city or from outside funding sources.
Okay.
Yeah. I guess a bit of clarification here is that I think it's key to understand that some of these initiatives that are outlined in the plan are, I would say, fully baked, and you could deploy them. So, for example, we've also identified and empower a tourism leadership structure and solidified and grow our financial model. Developing an inventory, for example, so while there is an inventory of all of our history and heritage sites, which we have worked with the county already to help include, we don't have an inventory of other visitor-facing amenities, such as restaurants and stores, things like that. But also some of these initiatives aren't deployable as tactics or as programs. For example, promoting every site as a visitor center thinking is a concept, is an idea. It needs specific programs and initiatives to help fulfill that and its objectives. So that's what this table is really going to be asked to help guide the work of staff, not necessarily replan, but to help ensure that staff stays on track and stays within the parameters of this plan as well. And through that table, help provide greater stakeholder buy-in and engagement from the entire city as well, and key stakeholders.
Okay, so my second question is just curiosity of why is the McLaughlin Neighborhood Association the only neighborhood listed?
We went off of the initial planning team from the 2018 plan. And I actually would love to hear input from the commission if there are omissions or potential ideas for new members. We just went with the folks that were already involved in the process. And as Commissioner Smith Jr. Pointed out, people that have read the plan already, that are up to speed and can hit the ground running with their sleeves rolled up.
Okay.
Could I help answer that question? There were actually 2 groups. There was the bigger group. If you look on that page that he showed, there were all the neighborhood associations included. And then there was a smaller group. So see, there's the visioning session group, and then there was a planning team group, and then there was a marketing branding group. So there were 3 different groups. I happened to be probably on 2 of the 3, and I was representing the McLaughlin neighborhood and heritage associations.
So this new group is going to do what exactly?
it's going to help guide and inform the work of staff to ensure that we're staying on track with the existing strategy plan.
Okay,
That would be my 15-second answer.
Commissioner O'Donnell?
okay. Can I, one more thing? Next time you come back to us with that matrix chart, can you like color in the boxes that you've completed? Because I can't tell where we're at. I would love to look at that, and you have boxes all over the place. And just let us know which ones you feel like you've completed, or come up with some way of showing progress on this essentially project outline of what what is being tasked to do, so that we can see some type of gauge of what you think has been completed, or that would be really helpful.
Will do.
Commissioner O'Donnell?
So quickly, I mean, the objectives are just, they're simple and they're good. Increase the number of visitors, increase their length of stay, increase their expenditures. That's our goal. And I mean, in doing that, then you go back and, as any business would do, is like, what's our product? What do we have to sell? How do we get it market ready? And how do we attract that audience and bring them here and provide for all the peripheral things? So we talked about restaurant offerings, historical offerings, outdoor offerings. We know the plan. My God, I can recite it just sitting here, having read both of them. And once again, I'll say, I don't want to spend an endless amount of time planning to plan again. Let's start making some progress. End of story. Thank you.
Anybody else?
I think what I hear Commission saying is that timetable needs to, not the timetable, but this meeting schedule for meeting 1, 2, 5, and 6 need to be adjusted to account for what has already been done, and also show what we're moving forward. And I think what I heard you say is that it's moving backwards. It needs to be more forward thinking. Am I getting your comments? I'm summing it down to really small, but you're basically saying what you see here is what we've already done.
I just don't know if the first 3 meetings, the first 3 meetings don't really accomplish anything. In my mind, the 4th and 5th meeting really sound like the grant process. It doesn't sound like those, at least in the descriptions, didn't equate to the direct mission. They were in general. They kind of sound like, it says tactics programs that support growth of visitors. These could be anything. They're not tied back to these pieces. If that meeting 4 was directly focused on how do we get these partners to work on the same hours, how do we get these partners to work on the same partnerships, that's what that should be about. But I think that could happen at meeting 2. So I guess I'm worried that we're not going to get buy-in from the people that have spent the last 10 years on this, going to a meeting where we know we're going to read through the same plans that we spent the last 10 years creating. I think that's a waste of our time. And I also worry about having meetings during the workday that people can't go to them. And so I see already the way that this schedule's written out, the full day one would be on a Monday. Well, how's that work? It does.
I believe it says actually during the week of, so it would be as needed. It would be arranged for the meeting time
you've got
for the schedule
specific
of.
dates on there. Dates and weeks. 5/18, that's pretty specific.
Yeah, proposed dating meet week, so it would be the week of that.
I'm just saying, meetings need to happen after the workday.
Commissioner Lyle Smith?
So it seems to me that one of the last gaps of information that you're looking for is there's an asterisk next to the city commissioner who's going to serve on this 2020 tourism stakeholder table and to serve as the chair of the stakeholder table. Is that correct?
Yes.
So you're needing this commission to come up with somebody, right?
Yes.
Is that a decision you were hoping for us to make tonight?
If you'd like to make it tonight, that would be wonderful.
We don't make decisions in work sessions.
You can make
However, as you can see, that wouldn't begin until January, so it's not necessarily made tonight.
Well, I want
Was
to,
it a volunteer?
I want to throw Rocky Smith and myself on this committee, since we
nominate
both have been
Rocky.
involved in it for all of our lives. Seems like. And I did discuss this with him ahead of time, so I'm not surprising him at the moment.
I mean, is this an official decision that we can't make
No,
in
but
a
I mean, I'm
work
just
session?
making a
Really? I
recommendation
mean,
that
a
when we
committee?
make the official decision that we would be willing to step up
Okay.
to do this.
Anybody else on this side before we move on? Thanks, sir.
Thank you.
So do you understand where you need to go?
Yes.
All right, yay.
Okay, 1992 Oregon City Municipal Code, Chapter 10.12, recreational vehicles. Chief Band.
Good evening, Mayor and Commission. This is a little unique scenario. I'm going to kind of tell you why we're bringing this to you, talk about the other side of the coin, and then just about kind of our recommendations on what to do moving forward. So we, Tony and I met with some concerned folks. They'd gotten a ticket. They had a recreational vehicle, a camper that was parked in front of their property. They'd come home from camping, unloaded some stuff, had a couple beers, thought, you know, maybe I'll wait till tomorrow to put it back onto my property. And code enforcement was headed to another complaint of another recreational camper that had been parked for a while on the street, and we're headed to cite that one and saw this one sitting there, so they wrote them a citation. So these folks get a $15 citation, but they thought, you know, shouldn't I be able to park my camper in front of my house? And they talked to neighbors, and I think they got somewhere in the neighborhood of 70 signatures in support of this. And so Tony and I met with them and thought that that's a lot of work, and anybody who's gone to the trouble of getting 70 signatures deserves to be heard, and we told them after our conversation that we would bring that in front of the commission. They were super reasonable. We explained some of the other side of the coin to them, and they were very responsive to that. And so that's the other side to this that I'm going to talk about just briefly about homelessness and in campers. What you're seeing, this $15 citation, that is probably I would call that the negative unintended consequence of the way our code is written right now. There are cities that we have talked to as we're all dealing with homelessness that are envious of how our code is because of how well armed we are to deal with recreational vehicles as it relates to homelessness. Some of what's happened briefly, you can look up, there's several different things in Oregon Live and different places. We've been in this thing where we will impound cars, and if nothing else, an impound company, if nobody picks that car up, they can at least go sell that car for $300, $400, $500 for scrap. You cannot scrap a recreational vehicle. We are, right now, it has gotten so bad, we pay $86 a foot to have them, the city has to pay that. So it will get impounded, and once they go through the process of basically Bud's Towing, taking ownership legally, then we have to pay $86 as a city to have that destroyed, taken apart.
$86 a foot.
A foot. And so what, some of the stuff that we've had happen is, say a tow company, the Buds who services us does not do this, but there have been other companies where they've impounded, they want to get rid of a motorhome that was abandoned, they cannot, and so they'll tow it to another city at 3 in the morning. That becomes a problem in that city. They can go back in our computer system and find out what police agency impounded that. So we kind of, law enforcement, we kind of fixed that problem, but we still have this problem of these things will go to auction and somebody will go buy them for pennies just to have a place to stay, and they'll go, you see them parked around. It is not really a problem here. Because our code, I'm sure you read it, I'm going to have it up in a second, you just can't have them on our streets. We deal with 1,250 code complaints is what we've had to date. And 703 of those relate to parking. And we have issued citations 56 times this year to recreational vehicles. Nancy Bush told me she estimates about 3/4 of those citations are vehicles that do not belong in Oregon City. And we have 5 people in code enforcement. We have a manager, somebody who's up at the office doing intake and phones. One person you see, Jesse, downtown, doing parking full-time. One person doing code enforcement everywhere else. And then another employee who's dedicated 50% 50 to parking, 50 to code enforcement. So when we talk about efficiencies, the downside of creating a system where we gave somebody 12 hours, 24 hours is when a complaint comes in, we would have to go chalk the tires, take a picture, come back, and then people play this game of move the car 6 feet, and you're just perpetually doing this. Okay, this is up. So that's our code. It's unlawful, anything, any of those things to be parked. I'm not going to read it all. I'm sure you've all read this. The exceptions, doesn't constitute a hazard, doesn't restrict vision of motorists on the public street, obstruct view from another property. It's got a valid license and registration. And if it's going to be parked even on private property, it has to be on some sort of a concrete, asphalt, or gravel, just something so aesthetically it's, fits in with the neighborhood well. So the considerations, and I'm kind of hurrying, I'm sure you'll have some questions, but considerations that we kind of wanted to relate her. This code puts us in a really good position. There was a situation that Commissioner O'Donnell brought up. There was a motorhome. It was not from our area. It was parked on Central Point Road, not in front of somebody's house, and we cleaned that problem up in a day. And it puts us in a really good place to do that. Some of the conversations that we had, other things that happen, people will have family from out of town come and just pull their motorhome up in front of the house, and so you'll see a hose and a plug-in. We kind of considered whether or not you add an affirmative defense. It's still a violation, but if this scenario exists, it's a defense, so you'd still probably have to go to court to prove that. What my thought is I would like us to leave the code alone. And what we're telling our staff to do now is we're going to make it a little bit easier for them to run a camper through DMV to find out where it's registered. So run the camper, don't just slap a ticket on there, run the camper. If it's registered to the house that it's in front of, go knock on the door, notify them what the code is, say, hey, you need to get this back wherever it goes as soon as possible, and just kind of deal with it that way and see what happens. This is the first one of these complaints that we've gotten in that I can even remember. And every point they have is valid. I wish we could just let people do that. But the unintended consequences, I think, what we would hear as a community would be, it would not be good. So I think we can fix this with just having them knock on doors. But we wanted to bring it in front just because simply they got 70-some signatures and went to a lot of effort to bring something to our attention. And do you have any questions?
So wasn't there one more slide in this thing?
I was going to put a question slide in, but I didn't.
Well, reading through the code and the staff report, it seems like you're missing one thing, and that is that you say somebody can be permitted to be somewhere for a week if they apply to get a permit. Is that right?
Yes.
So what about our park house?
Well, so
See, these are the questions I asked.
Right.
I mean, the same issues I have.
No, I don't.
So what I think what our plan is we've got the other issue that we've had one reading on, and our intent was we're going to bring that back for a second reading, and then we're going to fix the other part, get us in a position where we can start enforcing things. And then, because there's another one that had come up about, fireworks stands. Every year people put up on private property.
Well, tree lots, everything. I mean,
So we're going to bring that, back once. That's not what I'm here for. I'll certainly, and this could be a place where it goes. But,
All right.
Isn't this just on the street? Doesn't this only apply to public right-of-ways? It's not
Yeah.
applying to a park or a private?
No, it does apply to private property because you have to be on a concrete, a
Gravel or
gravel or
whatever.
whatever kind of pad, so it applies in both.
But the issue, well, yes. But the issue is, the reason they brought it forward is parking on the street in front of their house. That's why, that's the squeaky wheel right
And
now.
you're trying to resolve an issue where people are just parking motor vehicles, recreational vehicles, or whatever it is, somewhere where they don't live, or they're just I mean, I saw that thing in Portland where they had that one street.
Lots of
and
them.
It was like 20. One was there, and then the next day, 20 showed up, and they were all living there.
The valid point these folks have is if I'm going camping, I'd like to be able to, if I store it somewhere, I want to be able to pull up in front of my house, load it for a few hours, leave to go camping the next day. I don't think that the intent behind this code is to cite those folks. And those folks got cited in this. And that's that's completely reasonable. But if we change the code to accommodate that, that would be problematic. What I think we can do is staffing-wise do what we generally do with code stuff. We always try and work with people. Even, a lot of these will get a door knock anyways if there's somebody around.
What about the people that are just storing their RVs on the street or
They can't.
their boat or
They can't.
They can't.
whatever it is? I mean, I appreciate the staff being proactive. I mean, I'm sorry that these people got a ticket, but I appreciate the staff being proactive because it doesn't always work when it's complaint driven. If they're driving by and they see something and they don't, and like you say, they run the plate, they should be able to act. They shouldn't have to, wait till somebody calls about it because anyway, I think just people need to be conscientious about it. But I know a lot of areas of the city, people don't have room on their lot, so there's the RV that's there. And then you can tell when there's a few weeds growing up next to it, it's been there for a while.
plug-in.
Yeah.
Commissioner O'Donnell?
So I'll quickly say that I'm all for the introduction of common sense into law enforcement or code, and I like that. And the one we dealt with, it was a violation right down the road. I mean, it was unlicensed, it wasn't current, it didn't have a trip permit, there's a bag of garbage next to it. I mean, it was exactly what we wanted to move, and the chief and his crew did that. The other thing I want to say is whether we're considering this piece or the piece we talked about last week, something somebody taught me one time: progress, not perfection. Let's make some progress first and fine tune it secondarily, because we could throw what ifs at it till the cows come home. Progress, then perfection. And most of these things, when I see them, they're 98% there, and we can fix the other 2% whenever. Thanks.
Anybody else? All right, then we're moving on. Thanks, Jim. So I think we're at, make sure. Yeah, we're at PC 19-138, conditional use planning fee. Ms. Turway.
Thank you very much. I'm following up on a request from the City Commission to take a look at fees. We had worked through all of the fees previously, and this was just the last fee that there was a question. It sounded like the question from the Commission was, should we amend our conditional use fee? So before I get into it, real quick, a conditional use is a review where an application comes in, planner reviews application to verify it meets our minimum application requirements. Then, once it is complete, we post it on our website, we mail notices to neighbors, we make signs, post those, and then send some emails about it as well. Then we have a public hearing. There's things associated with posting planning commission agendas and doing that. We create a staff report with recommendations for findings. We have 1 or 2 generally public hearings for conditional uses, and then we write a notice of decision, and we follow up on the notice of decision if there's conditions of approval that are associated with the conditional use. That is the general process. Quantifying how many hours that takes us is extremely difficult. Of all of our planning applications, that's going to be one of the most difficult because normally it's tied with the site plan design review application, and also because conditional uses are things like schools or churches and neighborhoods. The impacts of them could vary significantly. We're working on one right now that is many, many hours, but there have been some that are relatively easy as well. So costs for planning commission fees are based on actual time spent or an average of time spent. I made an estimate of how much time it would take and how much it would cost us to mail notices and things like that. And I came up with a number that is very close to what our existing fee is now. The methodology for creating that number is not very accurate. It was all of us in the department estimating how much an average time would take. We don't really get a ton of conditional uses, and again, they're so tied to site plan design review, very difficult to estimate the fee. So I wanted to acknowledge this fee is not a science. So the conditional use fee now is $4,091. We estimated it would cost us $4,044.08. You could add an hour and then it would be at our actual fee. I just rounded it to 30 because that's an even number for staff hours. So we're in the ballpark of the realm of how much we think an average conditional use fee costs up to the city commission if you want to use general fund subsidy to reduce a lower conditional use fee cost. There was previously discussion about if they should be reduced for warming shelters, and I went back and listened to a couple of those work sessions and hearings on that, and what I heard from the commission was, no, we're not doing anything related to warming shelters, so the only question was just back to our general conditional use fee. I am here for any guidance. If you would like to reduce the fee or change the fee in any particular way, I am prepared to have a resolution to implement your wishes.
Questions? If you use your button, I can see you better. Why is it not coming up on my screen? I gotta have somebody look at this, Katie. Commissioner
It's not
McGriff?
working?
No.
Again? Wow. Okay.
No,
see it on mine.
Rachel's comes up, but yours didn't. I don't know why.
Well, I think the last discussion I recall us having, I went back and tried to look at some of my notes. I know that Commissioner O'Donnell and I both thought that the fee, and not speaking for you, Frank, but I'm just going back to my notes, was that we thought it was too high. And we talked about something in the range of, I don't know, the number I threw out was $1,500. And that's all I could find in my notes, but there was a lot of little scribbling on that agenda.
Commissioner Lassman, are you done?
Yeah.
Commissioner Lassman?
Yes, I believe one of the reasons I kind of wanted a consideration for the warming shelters, because to me, they're doing us a favor by providing a service to a community in need, and to me, $4,000 is a lot of money for a church or, a service provider, that's standing up and providing shelter on an emergency basis. So that's obviously something we can talk about. But can you explain, or have you considered, sorry, a bunch of questions there. Have you considered, like City of Beaverton has this minor versus major, so they have two different fees, and the same thing for another jurisdiction, I think Sherwood, that had one for like whether or not it was a certain type of application. Have you considered that at all?
Briefly, but generally no, because the process is still the same. So it's still the staff time to write the report, do the notice, have the hearings, have, people present at the hearings.
So do you know how the City of Beaverton, since you provided that table with all the comparisons, how are they drawing that line in the sand of what constitutes a minor versus major? Because clearly they have.
Yeah, I noticed one of the ones, Wilsonville, for example, has a lower fee for accessory uses for single-family dwellings in the Willamette River. So that was a choice they made to make that a conditional use, and they probably subsidized that process choice with a lower fee. So conditional uses are not the same across every jurisdiction. I mean, generally you could assume a church or a school in a neighborhood is, but other things may not be conditional uses, like we made shelters a conditional use. So I presume these minor conditional uses are little things that we probably just don't require conditional use for. In other words, we probably have more clear and objective standards that are much less discretionary. So our general philosophy is just be transparent, make the standard what it is, and then have an easier process because of that.
Commissioner O'Donnell?
So I'll say a couple things. One is I feel that any permitted action that places a demand on city services should pay a fee, and I mean any permitted action. And the only thing that bothers me about the fee is we don't, with all our sophisticated accounting and all our IT hardware, we don't accumulate costs. And any business that's working on a project would tell you that if I worked on project ABC 1, 2, 3, these were the costs that I incurred on it. And all we have is a feeling. And that's not a criticism of you or it's just why do we do business in such a haphazard manner where we could say, hey, we know that to process these things will range from $2,500 to $4,600, and it's like, it's just a feeling. And I wish we didn't have to pull a number out of the air, because I don't like that.
Right.
But I do feel that everybody, including the shelters, are going to pay a fee because they place a demand on city services, and some of those are significant demands. Thank you.
We did document a while back, how many hours we spend on each type of project, or at one point it was each specific project, and you would spend so much time of like 15 minutes here and 10 minutes there, that we just needed more efficiency out of staff because we have to get the reports done. We need to get the things done. So we don't at the moment.
See, I didn't see that in that report. And anywhere I've worked, it's like whatever project we're working on project number A1, and that's where we logged our time. And at the end, we knew what our cost was to put that product out there. And that's all I'm saying.
Well, I think, in the private sector, we have things that you can touch and feel and see, and you know what it's going to take. But in the electric industry, in estimating, you often didn't know you had the built-in contingencies because you didn't know for sure exactly how many parts or pieces you were going to need for a particular project. So I understand where Mr. was coming from. I also think that if, generally speaking, it's $4,000 of staff time, that I don't want to be subsidizing people to doing conditional uses. It seems to me like they've got have gone through a process and figured out what, generally speaking, the probable costs are. And at that point, I'm not interested in subsidizing folks to do that kind of stuff. Commissioner McGriff.
I just wanted to speak a little bit to what Laura is talking about, having processed many conditional use permits. And they're conditional, as she stated, for a reason, because they are going to have impacts on whatever area they're in. And generally, as she stated, they tend to be in residential areas. So you've got things like schools and churches who have traffic, and I know you all understand that. But it varies. I mean, it depends on how many times they come back, how many questions they have. It's not like when you're planning that you work on something and this is all you work on. It's all over the place. You might be dealing with 5 to 6 to 7 to 10 different things going on during your day. And like she's saying, 15 minutes here, 15 minutes there, that is hard. It's really hard to document. If you get a phone call and it's about this project and then it leads to that project, it's like, how do you, it's like a moving target in a lot of ways. So, I mean, conditional use permits do have clear and objective standards. In order for us to do minor or major, we'd have to figure out how to determine what that impact is. That's not going to be subjective. That's going to be purely conjecture. This might be an impact, this one might not be an impact. I mean, it's just really hard. And I know that the time that it takes to do the conditional use permit versus the time it takes to do a plan amendment and zone change, I mean, they're kind of on the same par. I mean, it's a lot of work. It's a lot of background you got to do. And particularly if the person is not super savvy, which most of our applicants are not. They're great people, but that's not their thing. You're spending a lot of time helping them through that process. There's a lot of hand-holding. There's a lot of process. So I get it.
What are you trying to say?
What I'm saying is I'm backing up what she's saying in terms of, yes, maybe, the $4,091 is probably what it really costs.
Okay.
But I think we also have to look at understanding where the other commissioners are coming from. We also have to look at, the community and somebody applying for this. And I understand there's degrees of sophistication, degrees of fees, but somewhere in the middle, I don't know. I'm going to go with by what you guys all say, and I hear what you're saying, but I just trying to get you to understand what she's saying, that it is a lot of work, having done these over the years.
Anybody else?
I'll just, sure. So it sounds like we were initially concerned about the amount of the fee. I think there's probably still some concerns, but nobody has a proposal on what we would change it to, and just shy of pulling some number out of the air.
That's what my number.
I think we have to depend on the managers or the directors'
recommendation.
She ran the numbers as best you can. I mean, unless we were to put in, say, a lawyer's phone system in planning so that every time they picked up the phone, they could code in and it would keep track of time for that particular call.
Yeah.
That's a pretty expensive proposition to do.
Lawyers do that?
Huh? Sure, lawyers do that.
I've never seen that in any of their offices.
Well, trust me, they do.
Log in every 5
I might have
minutes.
to go look a little closer.
I've built a few of those phone systems.
I mean,
Yes.
Thanks for that information, I didn't know that.
the only proposal that I put on the table, I don't think has interest, and that's around the warming site shelter. So if nobody has interest in that one, then I think we move on.
I think you have guidance.
I think
So
so.
I'm gonna do nothing and
Yes.
retain our existing fee?
Yes.
You're
Okay,
doing
thank you.
nothing.
Okay, last up, 19695, Malott Avenue Streetscape Project, Key Community Concerns Project Update, Mr. Wheeler.
No. Miss Webb.
Oh, Webb. You guys keep playing whack-a-mole. Go ahead.
So tonight I'm here to give an update on the Malala Avenue Streetscape project. Wanted to share a little bit of information about some of the key community concerns we've had, and then share a little bit of information about what we expect from a traffic impact perspective. We'd heard over the last few months concerns about public outreach to tenants, the need for a southbound right turn lane at Beaver Creek Road, pedestrian crossings, where they are, what they look like. Will the post office open the access to First Street, cross street banner location, gateway concept, and then the traffic impacts. So we've heard a lot of great ideas, and we have had an opportunity to include a fair amount of those in the project. We've gotten great feedback on from the biking community on bike lanes, as well as some requests to adjust pedestrian push buttons. So I do want to just share a quick screenshot of the public involvement webpage. So we do have a listing of all of the meetings that we attend and present at, with links to either the agenda or the video from those presentations, so you can see kind of where we've been and what we've been sharing. On our webpage under supporting documents, we also have all of the documents from the open houses, as well as newsletters and traffic memos. So those pieces of information are up on the webpage that anyone can get a hold of. A little bit of information about public outreach to tenants. We'd heard concern that not everyone that wasn't a property owner knew about the project. So we had JLA, our public involvement consultant, canvass the corridor the last week of August and the first week of September. They reached out to 75 businesses along the corridor, kind of focusing on those multi-tenant complexes where we were not looking to acquire right-of-way, so we hadn't made that kind of outreach on that one-on-one level. They were able to get 53 properties emails added to our interested parties list to make sure those properties are kept up to date. Some of the information that we heard back during that was concern for cut-through traffic on some of those multi-tenant properties, specifically the Southridge Center and the businesses near Thai Chef. So cutting across private property. They all understood the need for the safety improvements, and they were looking forward to understanding the impacts during construction. So kind of getting into some of the topics, one of the questions is the need for a southbound right turn lane at Beaver Creek Road. So we've had our traffic consultant look at this. There was questions in our original analysis about the volume of pedestrians that would be crossing from the north side of Beaver Creek to the south side. So we've looked at what that does to the through movement. And so this is based on the idea of converting one of the through lanes to a left turn lane where we only have one through lane. So any right turn movements would stop the through traffic. And so our traffic analysis has shown that both today with current volumes and in 2040 with doubled pedestrian volumes, the intersection still operates at an acceptable level of service. So we would not be proposing to include a right turn lane in the project at this time. We do know there are other operational improvements that we could do at the intersection that we are not including in the project at this time, specifically the northbound dual left turn lane implementation. And so the next time we update our transportation system plan, we would propose to do a little bit deeper dive into that intersection as a whole, look at timing for that northbound dual left project, and then also reevaluate the need for a right turn lane at that time. Those two could be combined into one project. They both would require changes to the signal poles and mast arms, which is quite a bit bigger endeavor than we're proposing with the improvements that we have included with the project north of Beaver Creek Road, which at this point are all striping, signing, and switching out one signal head. If you've got questions, you're welcome to pop them in. I was going to kind of shorten these to keep it brief. Yes.
Commissioner Smith?
So, in terms of speaking about you were saying that the intersection has capacity for how long? I mean, without failing in terms of pedestrians.
So what we did is we looked at today's operations and we looked at 2040. So in 2040, with doubling the pedestrian volume in that north to south movement, the pedestrian movement that would impact the right turns.
Could you use the pointer to show that? That would be helpful.
So,
I think I know what you're talking about.
Pedestrians here.
Here, okay, right. Yeah.
So if we double today's volume of pedestrians, which assumes the project is successful and increases pedestrian use along the corridor, we still operate the intersection at an acceptable level of service.
What is the volume today?
Of pedestrians, I would have to dig a little bit.
Because unless we know that, that means nothing to me.
I think it's 24 under existing conditions. 18.
And you are?
Do you want to come up?
Engineer.
Well, if you're gonna say something, you need to come to the mic, and so far, let's just move on here, okay?
that was allowed. Just trying to fill.
So the midday peak hour is 20 pedestrians and the PM peak hour is 24. So we would double those.
20 and 24?
Yes.
That is in individual people?
Yes.
Per hour?
In the 1 hour.
Oh, an hour, okay.
Okay.
Individual people.
All right, moving on.
Okay, the next item I wanted to share was this visual. So this is kind of what that implementation of the southbound dual left turn lanes looks like. And so it is using the existing pavement and creating a situation that addresses our current traffic volumes and future traffic volumes. So what this one does is removes the permitted left turn. So if you're that current flashing yellow here, so with the implementation of dual lefts, we would remove the flashing yellow. So we would be removing those near misses and angle crashes that occur at the intersection, so increasing the safety. It addresses the queue spillback in the PM peak hour that we see with that left turn lane. It's just not long enough to hold those cars all heading towards 213. It allows the future implementation of those dual northbound left turn lanes that I mentioned that we anticipate needing. And all of these things north of Beaver Creek are, as I mentioned, small cost. It's some pavement markings. We would be implementing some bike safety improvements and then additional advanced signage to alert drivers to that change in lane. So it's called a trap lane. You're in a lane that is a general purpose lane, and at some point you're required to make a left or a right. So although it's called a trap lane, there is no raised curb or median that would keep you from changing lanes. We've heard some concern about it being called a trap lane.
Would there be a provision on this to do what they did on State Street, where if you want to turn onto A and you're in the inner lane, you can make the turn, but they also have one where they both turn and then also one's turning and one's going straight. I mean, I use that a lot and I found it very helpful.
So in this case, that's not what we're proposing. That would not allow us that future dual left turn northbound lanes. So in the long term, as we see the Red Soils campus expand and develop, we know there's a need for that dual left.
But what about in the interim, till we get to that capacity? Is that something you've even considered? I mean, the project engineer people, have they even considered that? Because yes, there are times when that does back up, because I've been in it, and you're trying to get into that inner lane and you're backed way up kind of by where McDonald's is, and some people are stopped on the other side of the intersection, but it isn't like that constantly. But it would allow for an interim option where you could turn left or dual turn left, or you could continue to go straight, depending on how that light could change. And they have, I mean, State Street's much smaller than this, and they seem to be able to manage to do that. I just thought that was kind of innovative.
I think what helps at State Street is a three-legged intersection. I'm not sure what you would do with the northbound lefts off Malala in that situation, because you wouldn't know if the car coming at you was going to go straight or turn left. So it's a little bit easier when it almost used to be like 99E back in the day when you kind of had the skip lane on the going southbound.
Yeah.
You know, you knew.
Well, and the only other place that I can remember that it has something like that is Powell Boulevard at 205, coming east to west. You go under 205, there's a dedicated left turn lane, and there's a lane that has both a green arrow turning left and a green arrow going forwards. But there isn't any cross traffic there.
That's right.
The other traffic is not coming.
You're not, you don't have the left conflict from the other direction.
Right.
And Lake Oswego has the same thing, but it's the same situation. There's not anybody trying to make a turn cross traffic. So,
And I hesitate to, beyond just tossing ideas out there, trying to redo the work of staff that actually do this for a living.
I think it looks good. Can you tell me what the green little hashes are?
The green hashing is markings in the bike lane, and so it's conflict paint, so it alerts drivers that they are in an area where they're crossing the path of a bicyclist. And so this is kind of our first project that we're using the green bike lane paint in those high conflict areas.
Okay.
And that was actually at the request of a bicycle advocate that we look at that with this project.
I think it's a good idea.
The next slide is just a visual. So a couple of months ago, the city installed what's referred to as a pan-tilt zoom camera at the Beaver Creek and Malala intersection. So this is a screenshot from a Tuesday at 3:30. So you can see in that red circle how far back that left turn queue is going. Our peak hour does not start until closer till 4 or 4:30, but this was a screenshot at 3:30. So you kind of have to envision those cars in that through lane all squishing into one, and then the left turns would have those two lanes. So kind of, it's a point in time, but it's an example of why those dual lefts would help us.
I understand why the dual lefts will help. I totally understand that. Part of the problem is we have all that platooning on Malala Avenue, where there's nothing but, it's like 15, 16, 20 cars coming and there's no gaps. And I don't know how you fix that.
The next item is the north pedestrian crossing. So this is located by Wells Fargo and Black Rock Coffee across from the Mountain View Apartments. So I personally spoke with the Southridge Center property manager about this, kind of taking the feedback that we got from our canvassing from their businesses about the concern for cut-through traffic. Those tenants' concern is for cars pulling in that left and using this kind of main aisle as a kind of in their own words, a raceway through the shopping center. So Southridge Center property manager does believe that this raised median and safe pedestrian crossing would be a benefit to their complex. It would benefit their patrons that are visiting the complex. And so they do agree that the project should move forward with this raised median. I also spoke directly with the Mountain View apartment property manager. They also believe the median provides a benefit to their site because it allows their residents and the residents in the mobile home park behind the apartments a safe place to access the shopping center.
How many people live in that
TriMet.
complex? Do you know what the number of apartments is in that complex?
I don't.
It's pretty sizable, though.
I know it is, yeah, that's what I was,
I think there's 8 buildings.
Yeah, probably.
if you count the mobile home park, that's not a lot of people.
So are the main entrances to that shopping center going to be currently right there at the entrance that you have shown where it says Malala Avenue, and then around at the light on the other side off of Beaver Creek?
This one shows all of them. So the FAs are full access. The ROs are right in, right out. The white ones are existing and the yellow ones are proposed. So the changes would be to that full access by Wells Fargo and Black Rock would become a right in, right out for that pedestrian median. And then the driveway in front of Goodwill would be switched from a right only to a full access. So right now, it does not have a median that restricts the left, but it has a sign telling you you're only allowed to turn right. And that sign would be removed. We've looked at that driveway and there's no sight distance issues to be able to make that left out.
But if you're driving south on Malala, you can make a left turn across traffic into that entryway as well?
In front of Goodwill, yes.
Right.
That's the dangerous part.
Okay.
Okay.
The pedestrian crossing midway. So this is a little bit zoomed in, and I apologize because the yellow signs did not get moved from the old location to the new location. So the location here is the correct one. We've proposed to place it between the 2 post office driveways. That gets it a little bit closer to Garden Meadow, which is the location requested by the neighborhood, but still allows one car the ability to get into the left turn lane to make it into this complex here with Miller Paint and Biscuits Cafe. This also addresses any concerns the fire department may have had about getting their longer vehicles fully outside of the travel lane and into the turn lane before entering the station.
You forgot about the cupcake place there that people are turning into.
That's usually what I reference, but everybody else seems to think of Miller Paint.
That's a very
biscuits.
popular. Well, I go to Miller Paint and then I go get a cupcake.
I just go get cupcakes.
So we also met with the post office to discuss the idea of reopening the connection back to First Street. They shared pretty strongly their concerns for safety and security, and at this point, they were not willing to continue discussing opening up the First Street access to the post office.
Why did it get closed off in the first place?
I'm not sure.
Safety and security.
I know people
that's their reason today is safety and security.
People
I don't
drive
know
in
if
there
that
with
was
those
the
huge
original.
rigs and they cannot get out of there. I mean, that was where they could get out. It was crazy.
So what will happen with the crosswalk that's currently at Garden Meadows?
It would be removed.
So folks will either have to go to the light at First Street or come down.
Yes, the marked crosswalk would go away. It's still a legal crosswalk because it's an intersection. So there will still be curb ramps. They just will not be a marked crosswalk on the pavement. Next up, the south end pedestrian crossing. So this one is kind of moved a little bit south, a little closer to Lazy Creek Lane based on feedback from open house attendees. I think this is maybe the easiest one for everybody to agree was the right location. The cross street banner will be down at the south end, just south of Char Diaz Drive, kind of in that red circle area, far enough in front of the marked crosswalk to allow appropriate sight distance for a pedestrian. The next item, gateway design. The majority of the folks that commented on gateways liked the basalt seat wall concept, so those will be included in the project. And then traffic impacts. So we've kind of broke these into two groups. The top one is traffic impacts during the project. So essentially from the start of the project until the finish of the project, we anticipate having 2 travel lanes on Malala with no center turn lane. So in order to construct the project, we'll squish all 3 lanes of traffic and the bike lanes to one side of the road while we work on the other side, and then we'll slide the traffic over. So that center turn lane would go away. There would be signage that bikes are on the roadway with the vehicles. And then we're likely moving towards a implementation of the Claremont and Gaffney signals being converted to a 4-way stop during construction. So that removal of the left turn lanes makes it difficult to function the signal. You'd have to have northbound traffic go, and then everyone else stopped, and then southbound traffic go. So we really start to see pretty big backups with that situation. The 4-way stops actually look better from a traffic queuing and a delay through the corridor perspective. The intermittent traffic impacts that we would see would be those 2 travel lanes at times down to 1 with flagged traffic while work is being done in certain areas. We do anticipate closure of the side streets and driveways for short periods of time. As a reminder, the project is reconstructing the entire roadway section, which is 19 inches deep. And so in front of every driveway and every side street, we've got to dig down 19 inches, clear that out, and then rebuild it with rocks, slowly in small sections. So there'll be short closures of Claremont and Gaffney and driveways to properties. We've been working through the plan sets to make sure that properties have access. So if they've got 2 driveways, we would do 1 driveway closure and the other one would be open, and then we will swap them. There are some properties.
Quick question about that.
Yes.
So could you give an example? So I'm thinking of a property that's on Gaffney that might be impacted, which would be Burgerville. So they've got a driveway that comes off on Gaffney, they've got a driveway that's on Malala, and then they got their drive-through situation going on. So how would something like that work for them?
So in that case, the driveway on Gaffney would never be closed because the project doesn't go that far back. So that one would be open all the time. Between the Burgerville and Joanne's, they share 2 driveways directly onto Malala. So one of those would be closed and the other would be open, and then we would swap them.
Okay.
There are some properties that are a little more difficult to address. The post office has 1 in, so that one will be one we'll have to work on. The fire department has 1 in, and so that we will continue to work with them. I've met with them and we discussed an option that we need to continue to discuss that would be partial closure of their station. So they would relocate all of their equipment off-site, possibly to the location they were at while their station was under construction, so that they have all of their equipment, and we would dig out in front of their driveway probably over a night.
Really
and
fast.
Get it rebuilt. And so there's still things to work out. But we're at a point where we have a good idea where those large impacts are, and we can start those discussions with individual property owners.
Okay.
Again, the concept along the whole corridor is it continues to be open. We will see delays and slower traffic speeds through there, but otherwise we'll have signage up for businesses noting that they're open and how to get to those businesses. Early construction work. So we are working to get the tree removal plans pulled together. We have applied for a tree removal permit, and we are putting together an early construction package to get those trees removed as early as January 2020 in order to keep the project moving forward and allow that space for PGE to work.
What trees are we removing?
Yeah, can we talk about that?
In the packet, there's a set of plans that shows, I believe it's 13 trees that need to be removed for the project.
And are they of any size that the lumber from those would be worthwhile?
I'm not sure how big a tree needs to be for the lumber to be usable. So
Well, I
for
just wanna check
example,
it. I would want you to check that out to see if there's a way that we can use that for the other city purposes before we just throw it away.
okay, I know, I think there's about 5 trees in front of Marquee that would be coming down. There are 3 palm trees at the south end of the corridor that will be being removed.
I don't think we can use any wood from that.
No.
So I don't think there's very many large evergreen trees.
Okay.
Is Marquee the place right on the corner of
Yeah,
Beaver
Talk
Creek?
about that a little further.
Yeah, they're the ones that have the 2 really pretty, nice trees.
Yes.
And there's no way to keep those?
So our project team looked at it. One of them could be saved if we meandered the sidewalk further onto Marquee's property, and they were not interested in pursuing that option.
And can we tell them that we are interested in pursuing that option? I've been looking at this because I use US Bank there, and I saw this, and I've been over there kind of looking at this, and I just think that it's unreasonable for them to cut down, to suggest that these trees be removed because they don't like them, or that you've come up with an option to try to save them so that they would minimize their tree planting, because we know what they're going to plant. And that's, again, we've had a big discussion here recently about tree removal. And the 2 ones that look kind of shrubby, you know, on the top of your packet here, those don't look like they're going to be so much of an impact, but these are like right on the street. And
So are those trees on Marquis property?
Yes. So they are in the process of dedicating the right-of-way the project needs. So today they are on Marquee's property. Once they dedicate them, they'll be within the right-of-way.
Well,
So they will be city-owned then? Are they cutting them before the dedication of right-of-way?
or are they making that, I just think we ought to try to save them. If it's going to be
Yeah,
part of
that
the
was-
right-of-way and you can meander the sidewalk,
I,
let's go for it.
I find no useful thing there. Trees grow back, just like grass grows, and if you mow it and then it grows back again. This is not the end of the world, and I don't want it to cost whole bunch more money for the city to make some plan to go around one stupid tree.
Yeah. I guess it's not clear to me why the trees need to come out. You're not expanding the road there?
They're going to be in the right of way once the right of way is dedicated. So where sidewalks or something else is going to go.
We are doing some slight widening in front of Marquee.
Okay.
Can we try to keep the 1 tree that you made the recommendation, please?
We can ask them. I believe it impacts their site circulation because it pushes the sidewalk further. They're pretty tight there in front of their building with their drive aisle. But we can ask.
I'll come down and see you and see, I don't know what the site plan is, so I don't know how that would affect it, but I would come down and see you and see that, look at that. Thank you.
Yes. So after the early tree removal, then we would expect to see PGE starting to come in and placing the new poles. So they'll be placing new poles further back behind the existing poles, and then they will transfer the PGE lines over, and then following PGE's transfer of their lines, then the 6 communication companies that also have lines on those poles would follow PGE in moving of their lines.
So why aren't you undergrounding there?
Dan, you just read my mind.
Well, it's because I just went through undergrounding on a different project.
So the approximate cost to underground this corridor is about $1 million.
So on one hand, you'll force us in the police department to underground some stuff, but when it's the city, you're just going to say it costs too much.
So the communication lines and the PGE distribution lines could be underground. The higher transmission lines could not, so we would still have poles in the corridor.
Exactly the point I made in the police station. I'll let you go on that one.
Are these going to be nicer looking poles, or they're just going to be the same old cruddy ones that we normally get?
There'll be new PGE poles.
Light pole, transmission pole technology has not changed in over 100 years.
Whatever
That is-
PGE wants to install.
They're wooden, they're soaked in creosote or some other compound and they last a long, long time. So they aren't gonna change.
Well, we're gonna beautify it, and then we're gonna have the crappy looking poles.
The poles will be behind the back of walk, so they will not be in the walkway.
Like they have been.
Okay.
Okay?
For a project timeline, we're currently working on the final plans. The final plan set is approximately 300 pages, so it's a big chunk of plans with lots of details that we're still working out. As I mentioned, the early tree removal, late January. PGE should be getting started in February. The project would go out to bid for a contractor for the construction project in March, with that construction contractor starting in late spring.
Commissioner Smith?
The continuity question from Lower Molalla to Upper Molalla. When Lower Molalla was done, new light posts, sidewalks, etc. The understanding was that the future Upper Molalla would match that. And so much so that individual properties that have built along Molalla in between the two have put in new sections with matching light posts. The problem is the historic light posts. On my last drive down Molalla, I counted maybe 4 different styles. And I asked that question before, is the new Upper Molalla then going to be the new standard for what those light posts look like? And then at what process do we replace all the other ones to match? Because we have at least 4 or 5 different styles. I haven't even looked at Main Street. We might even have half a dozen different styles. The urgent care that just went in has a completely different light style than all the other ones on the street. It doesn't match any of them. And not only that, the styles don't match, but the colors don't match. So you have bright orange, and then you have the LED white. So when you go from Lower Molalla, Upper Molalla, it looks like a mess, which, adds to, it's not complemented by also the PGE poles. So at some point we have to say, well, is the new standard the Upper Molalla, and then what's the process to replace the other poles to match?
Why do we need to replace the other poles to match?
Well, we need to, I'm not saying all at once, but as a pole gets hit, it should be replaced with one that matched the rest of the corridor. I mean, it looks...
Okay, well, I can understand that. I was concerned about
I just want to see that there's
taking
a
out
plan.
infrastructure that is currently working just because it doesn't fit in
I'm just saying, when we designed Lower Molalla, the concept was every addition after that would match. It doesn't. So at what point do we, and that's hard to do because maybe the certain style isn't found anymore. I don't know. But I just think we have to make an effort to try to be consistent because it defeats the purpose of putting a new section in if it looks completely different than everything else and it's a mismatch.
We do have slightly different lights downtown and on the first phase of the Molalla project. We are specifying a street light that's pole that's very similar looking. We are evaluating pole material types, cast iron versus steel pipe poles. So some of those minor things that I'm not sure you'd notice, the bases will be
I would notice.
pretty consistent.
I'm going to take pictures. There's 4 different top parts.
Yeah, the
on
luminaires we've struggled a little bit with. We're working to transition away from those high pressure sodium, which is that oranger light, to the LED, which is a white light. But what we're finding is the luminaire that we're using doesn't provide a big enough light on the sidewalk. So we're looking to update the luminaire standard.
There's also still a few that still have the bright reflective numbers at the bottom that were slowly removed over time that I hope if we still see them, we're removing.
Yep. So we're identifying a new lighting standard that will be used for any new lights on Molalla, downtown. And so slowly they'll all start to match more.
I don't believe it.
Commissioner McGriff?
I just wanted to ask a coordination question. So between Laura and Dana, Where are we on the site plan and design review for the proposed expansion for Marquee? Have they submitted anything at this time, or is it still pending, subject to what we're doing with Malala Streetscape?
I believe we did a parking adjustment for Marquee with the site plan design review that went before the planning commission earlier this year.
Okay, and so how is that being coordinated with this project?
I can answer that.
Very much, same people.
Yep.
Okay.
The plans from Marquee are in for review. We've done their first permit review and given them comments back. Those plans, when they come in, have been coordinated with Dana and her team to make sure that we're on the same page. And even before those plans came in, we did the same thing. So every time a new set of plans comes in, we're making sure they coordinate.
Okay, well, I just want to make sure that when I come down to look at that thing regarding the tree, that's already been done. So I will come down and see you, so.
Commissioner Lyle-Smith?
Thank you.
Thank you. I have two questions. One, the pedestrian crossings, will they all have the blinking lights?
Yes.
My second question, are there any other options than the four-way stops at Claremont and Gaffney? Some folks aren't very good at doing four-way stops. So were there any other options considered?
Thank you for saying
Because
that.
I think those two, particularly the one for Fred Meyer, I mean, that could be kind of a nightmare intersection. So were there other options considered? Or was that it?
You talked about,
Body
you have
of
to
the
stop each
traffic
direction
control.
and allow the lefts. I guess you could take away the lefts.
Yeah, I mean, we could take away the lefts from Malala. That would make it, the problem is, and I
These are
don't,
just temporary, right?
yes, it's
just
just
during
during
construction?
construction.
You know, sometimes you just have to put up with bad stuff while you're building something.
So is that 6 months? Is that a year? Is that 2 years?
1.5 years?
So for 1.5 years, folks, so is it that it's gonna be one lane, each has one lane, so everybody drives up with one lane at a four-way stop? Or is it 2 lanes and some are turning and, you know, I mean, I know people are gonna turn, but how simple can we make this four-way stop so that it's really clear how people are maneuvering? Because there's some more four-way stop options that are more complicated that people struggle with still.
So the Fred Meyer Gaffney one, the side streets would stay as is. So on Gaffney, currently, it's just 1 lane. And then on the Fred Meyer side, it has the 2 lanes. So that would stay. And then we would have the 1 lane each on Malala. So what our traffic modeling showed is that the four-way stop controlled has less delay and less queue spillback. So of particular concern is the Claremont intersection with the traffic signal that's one at a time. It will spill back and impact the Beaver Creek and Malala signal.
Rachel, were you concerned about the four-way stop that's at 10th and Main, where there's some confusion that happens on a daily basis there about who has the right of way?
Well,
I
yeah,
drive through other four-way stops on a regular basis, not those.
you know,
and
Lynn Avenue and Holmes
yeah.
Lane, works fine.
Yeah, people know that the person on the right goes right. Maybe
Well-
you could put that in your public
It
information.
won't do any good. Anything else?
That's all.
Questions, concerns? Okay, then we'll move on. Mr. Manager, you have anything for us?
The only update I have is that, just to remind everybody that on Friday, December 13th, we're going to have our retirement celebration for Director Cole from 3 o'clock to 6 o'clock at the Oregon City Library, with some discussions about her and what she's been able to accomplish for the Oregon City starting about 4 o'clock.
So we can talk about her in front of her?
You may.
Like a funeral.
It's all that I have, yes.
Maybe it's like a roast.
Okay. Anything from the commission?
No.
I have just one thing. I'm going back to the Willamette Falls Locks Commission next week. I think you all saw our next next regular meeting agenda, there's going to be an item on there committing us $10,000 a year for 5 years as our portion of commitment to the new process, what it's going to be
For the locks?
for the locks.
Aren't they
Yes.
meeting tomorrow? Isn't the locks commission meeting tomorrow?
I had mine on Thursday. I'll check my schedule, make sure. You're right, it's Wednesday, so that we're meeting tomorrow. Beyond that, I don't have anything. Commissioner Smith? Commissioner McGriff, you have anything?
Yeah, I just have one that the Downtown Oregon City Association, as I mentioned last time was very, and the chamber were very accommodating to our folks from the show, Small Business Revolution, and our drop dead date is the 14th. We're also going to be going through a strategic planning process next month, and they were very appreciative of our getting the contract approved and passed. And then we will be having a presentation by former Mayor Alice Norris on the Willamette. I always have to look it up too because they keep changing the name, as you know. Willamette Falls and Landings Heritage Area Coalition. They were going to give you a report on what is going on and where they are in the progress of getting the legislation. Obviously, Congress is still distracted by that other thing, so it has not moved forward with our congressional delegation.
No, I have a quick question. Is there anything going on? I was thinking there was a December event for the 175th year. I thought there was a December event.
No,
Is there
we
December event?
we mentioned it at the tree lighting. That was it.
That was it?
That was it.
We're going to have,
the proclamation, the meeting.
we're going to have
There'll be a
proclamation.
resolution at the next meeting.
Yeah,
That
we
was
did
the only
the big
event that we
thing
have
was
planned.
this summer, because we knew that Oregon City on the
Yeah.
24th
So on
of
the
December.
18th, wear your Oregon City swag.
I just knew that there were some discussions about a December event and I hadn't heard, so.
We're adjourned.
When we did the 150